Okay, we're with Mr. Jere Gettle, owner of Baker Creek Heirloom Seeds, which is, in my opinion, one of the most amazing seed companies out there today. They're very active with promoting heirloom seeds, and we want you to learn more about heirloom seeds. So we're gonna ask him a few questions today. Are you there with us, Mr. Gettle?
Sure am. Good to be here.
Thank you very much. First of all, we kind of want people to get to know a little bit about who you are. Where you came from. I understand you came from our neck of the woods over here in Oregon. I'm in near Boise right now. Could you give us just a little bit of brief history on your gardening background? Where did you start? What were your beginnings?
I started as a young child actually in the garden with my parents and grandparents in the Boise Valley of Oregon, and right on the Idaho-Oregon border, just literally right within a mile of the border. And my parents and grandparents and all my relatives pretty much in my family on my dad's side and my mom's side lived in the area. And I guess basically grew up in my parents' gardens and their gardens. So gardening just kind of was in my veins and came naturally. I mean, I started planting seeds when I was like 3 years old.
Wow, that is an early start. For people who might be unfamiliar with heirloom seeds, what are, by definition, heirloom seeds compared to some of the other things that we might buy at the local store this gardening season?
Heirloom varieties are basically varieties that have been passed down, from generation to generation. Heirloom seeds are what seeds used to always be. Seeds were something that were treasured in families and in communities. Something might come from, whether it's, Little Rock, Arkansas, or Boise, Idaho, or San Francisco, or, whatever town you might be in. And every little community used to have seeds that were passed down and, carried with you when you traveled across the, prairie on your covered wagon. You took seeds with you from back east and planted them in your gardens and, in many cases, saved them over the generations. And just recently, people started, getting patented and hybridized seeds over the last 50, 60 years or so. And that's when people started not realizing where their seed came from anymore. It basically became part of a corporation versus part of a family.
Gotcha. So heirloom is exactly that, something that's been passed down through the generations. Now, you mentioned that people seem to have lost touch with where their seeds came from, and we've seen a little bit of a rise in people showing an interest in gardening again, people who haven't done it before in their lives. Why do you think that perhaps so many people might be unfamiliar with gardening techniques and the seeds that their grandparents used? Why do you think that has come about, that we've become detached a little bit?
Well, a lot of people, through the 50s and so forth, started thinking everything was going to be modernized. We started talking about microwaves and TVs and people's, computers and so forth. Everything started becoming from a package and from a machine. So people kind of lost touch with where food came from. They also, I think a lot of the younger generation at the time didn't want to basically work on a farm job. It was often considered, low pay and hard work, go get an office job. But I think the generations are starting to, want to reconnect to nature again and where food comes from, where they're, the seed and, everything about farming, and gardening. They want to reconnect to it in some small way because it was, society started thinking everything needed to come out of a box and out of a package from a grocery store, and it's finally turned full circle when people realize that it's actually more nutritious if you buy it at a farmer's market.
Right. Now, with that in mind, because I know myself, I'm trying to grow heirloom seeds more than I did when I first started gardening, because I want to preserve that heritage. I want to be able to increase the health of the vegetables that are coming to my table, my family's table. With that in mind, what role are GMOs, in your opinion, trying to play with the food supply? Why have they become such a dominant moving force with our everyday grocery store foods?
Oh, there's multiple reasons, but, one of the big reasons is, the big corporations that produce them want to sell them. They also have more control over these varieties and in many cases even control what chemicals get put on them, like, Roundup Ready corn and soybeans, of course, have to have Roundup. And the same company that, usually makes the seed also makes the chemical. So it makes a, very good package that can be controlled and used every year. So the farmers basically have to buy from, a few corporations every year. It locks in the seed supply to the corporation. It also keeps the farmer coming back, and it gives the farmer a few benefits in their eyes, unfortunately, that they think that, now we don't have to work. We can just, work as much. We can spray more, which in the long term, creates weeds that get resistant to the different chemicals which are showing up, insects that get more resistant, and, puts a lot more chemicals just out on our fields. I mean, the amounts of chemicals, it's going up every year due to the in particular amounts of Roundup that are being sprayed on the fields.
Now, is it true that we're finding that we can actually have very productive crops if we use, for lack of a better thought, proper heirloom seeds for the region that we're in, for the pests that we encounter, that the yields are actually somewhat the same?
It depends. I mean, there's some heirloom varieties and, even traditional hybrids that yield pretty much just the same as, the modern GMO. It all depends on where something was developed and where it's being grown. But yields haven't really went up. Yields haven't skyrocketed with gene-altered crops. I mean, they're high, but commercial hybrids are also high, as far as corn goes on the market. So that's really not the biggest advantage so far for the farmers anyway that they see as an advantage is the ability to just be able not to cultivate their crops, which, is something that really has always happened. Now so we just go in and spray our crops.
Gotcha. Now what can an individual do? And again, our audience is anybody from, maybe a small farm, an acre or two, right down to somebody who lives in a city who might be gardening for the first time on the balcony of a 14-story apartment. What can individuals do to help preserve heirloom seeds as a normal food source, a normal way of cultivating next year's plants? How can they start? What's a good place to begin?
Well, there's multiple different ways, and probably, to begin at the very beginning on what people can do, even before they're able to plant, is start shopping at farmers markets and looking for varieties, that come from your local area, varieties that are being grown by local farmers, varieties that are nutritious, varieties that are flavorful. Pick those out. There usually will be heirlooms. The other thing is, as far as keeping gardening alive, whether it's, if you're in an apartment or wherever you are, and keeping the seeds alive, is, maybe find a local variety if you're in wherever you might be located. If you're in LA or you're in New York or, somewhere in between or out in the country, you can find something that comes from your local neighborhood. It doesn't take very long. Talk to local gardeners, get a local seed, hang on to it, and, save a few seeds every year. Even if you're just growing basil in a pot, you can still, save some seeds, save some cuttings, share them with your friends and neighbors, distribute them throughout the city and the garden clubs and your community and churches or whatever organization you might be involved with. School groups are always looking for seeds. Save a few and distribute them, and keep that going on. And it builds awareness to show how important keeping the local varieties are alive, and it also, in turn, keeps a lot of different varieties alive. If every little area had a few people doing that, it would really drastically change, the picture of what our food looks like if we could get more people, preserving local varieties.
Now, are we seeing an increase of seed banks per se for different regions? Is that something that has always been around, or is that something that's kind of new because of the interest in getting back to heirloom seeds?
Seed banks and organizations have always been around, but there's kind of a new growing movement in cities and small garden clubs and so forth to have these. Like us, there's seed libraries sprouting up all over where people can basically bring seeds, and oftentimes, hosted in a public library, but you can actually bring in seeds and, trade seeds for other seeds and, check out seeds basically, and you're supposed to bring seeds back when you harvest them. And there's all sorts of seed banks, starting up small and large, to help preserve rare and old varieties. Unfortunately, not many of them are still not cataloged, so that's what, the home gardener can do to preserve them, send them into different organizations that are trying to save them and keep them going, and keep them going in your own neighborhood as well.
Right. Now, I understand that you first had interaction with the Seed Savers Exchange, and that's how you got started with a lot of the seed activity you have now. Are there any other organizations like that that were also influential with you?
Oh, Seed Savers is one of the big ones, but there's other organizations and companies. Sandhill Preservation Center in Iowa is actually not a nonprofit, but they basically operate like a nonprofit, and they preserve lots of different rare varieties of seeds as well as poultry. But then there's other organizations that I was also a part of and still am in general, like Seeds of Diversity Canada. There's also Native Seed Search, multiple different organizations out there that are working in some way, to preserve, whether it's a local or regional supply of seeds to, a national, or in some cases like Seed Savers Exchange, even an international, scope of membership.
So they will exchange seeds internationally as well.
They do on a smaller scale. There's members from other countries as well, exchanging seeds. And then, of course, a valuable tool anymore is just the Internet to find things.
Okay. And I was going to get me to the next question. Where can people best get in contact with you or some of the seed sources in their area? I know you do a number of publications. Could you talk a little bit about those?
Yeah, we do a number of different things. We do our catalog every year, which is about a 200-plus page catalog with listing about 1,400 different varieties and events and other things as well in there. Then we do a quarterly magazine, which we put out every quarter. You can get it on our, you can get all this on our website, which is rareseeds.com, or you can, pick up the magazine also in some stores, bookstores in particular. But we also, do a few other little publications throughout, the year. For our events and, guides to doing this or that. But the big two are the catalog and the magazine.
Okay. And now, just as a matter of curiosity, talking about international seeds and saving things from years gone by, we wouldn't happen to know what is the oldest variety of seed that you carry, and then possibly what would be maybe the most exotic variety of seed that you've come across?
Those are good questions. The oldest question is, they're both difficult, but the oldest question, we don't really have any, factual evidence of, how old something actually is. Like the black radishes that we carry, we know the ancient Romans had black radishes. There's lots of crops that we have that date to the 15 and 1600s, but most things just kind of get lost in history. We see, like the last reference might be in a book in, 1698 or 1812 or whatever, but we don't usually have references to like who introduced it or where it came from. A lot of these seeds were developed or selected by some family, maybe say in the mountains of Italy, but a lot of these stories, those stories get lost over time, especially the ones that go way back. If there was something that somebody developed in, say, 1912 or even the 1880s or 1850s, a lot of times the story's still there, but when you go way back, like, 1,000 years or more, most of the stories is just very brief mentions maybe in some ancient text.
Okay.
So we don't really have a precise introduction date. And as far as exotic goes, it's all in the eye of the beholder. I mean, we have things like, the Tigger melon, which is a bright orange and yellow striped melon from Armenia. Then we have, all sorts of, striped tomatoes, all colors of striped tomatoes. We got one called Violet Jasper, which is a purple and green striped tomato that I really like. And we have the orange and white-fleshed watermelons like Orange Glow and white-meated watermelons. But it's all what people are used to and what's common in the area, because every to one person, a white watermelon might be something you grew up with, but to many people it's something they'd never heard of.
Gotcha. Well, very interesting. And again, we thank you very much for talking with us today. I could talk to you for hours about vegetables. I get your catalog. I've got your book, and I've read them both cover to cover. So we would encourage people to get in touch with Baker Creek Heirloom Seeds, again, at rareseeds.com. And we're going to have some links here in the article that you can go to find out more about this topic and hopefully get started planting your own seeds. And thank you very much for being with us today, Jere.
It'd be great to get people, growing any way they can or buying at the farmer's market if they can't.
Absolutely. Well, again, Mr. Gettle, we thank you very much for talking with us today.
Thank you.